Betzner. There's this whole. There's Bothan is the famous. Bothan though shows the really wonky-looking sign, which I think was to explain the fact that the distortion was wrong, which would solve some problems until you take it this far. Of course, that was when you do it. If you know how to do it, you can avoid even having to use Bothan. Well, the question was the Stebbins sign actually moved before the Dallas Police Department took their photo? Now, I posted some analysis. In fact, I mentioned some of this on Black Op Radio last September. It's a difficult thing to do because you've got to take a number of photographs and use the maps, figure out where everyone was, and do this horrible three-dimensional trigonometry. But the Bronson slide, which doesn't show that wonky-looking sign that you see in Bothan, nice, beautiful-looking side on, and you can figure out where Bronson was. If you don't believe it, you can align this and check the line of sight. And he was standing on that pedestal on the other side of Main Street. That tells you which way the sign was pointed. Because if it was pointed any other way, you would have seen more than just the side of it. You would have seen the actual, some width to it. And that tends to agree with the Dallas Police Department photo. You put that information with the DPD photo, and the sign comes out to be the right dimensions. The Betzner photo, there's a supposed Zapruder looking at the back of the Betzner photo, and you figure out where Betzner is, and you do the calculations. Again, a little short of, this came out to be a little short of 8 feet wide, but pretty close. There's uncertainties with doing this because there's so many parameters involved. And Willis photo, again, you figure out where Willis is, you work out the sign, and even the angles of these signs seem to be consistent with the Dallas Police Department photograph. These are apparently taken during the assassination, although I don't trust any of them. I'm sure some of them are genuine, but I'm not sure which ones. But let's assume they are genuine. They agree with the Dallas Police Department photo, which tends to suggest that the sign was still in the same place 5 days later that it was, or 3 days later, as it was at the time of the assassination. If some of these or all of these are genuine, Zapruder is the odd man out. The sign is 8.5 feet wide, maybe explaining these panels down the side, because it's too wide for the pieces of plywood they use to make their signs. But as I said, this is not, the proof involves many different measurements, and it's hard to show it to you other than telling you it works out. It's not as clear as what I've shown you before.
John, look at this data.
Yep.
Looking at the Betzner, it looks like the signs got a weird angle.
Yeah, you've got to.
And didn't Hudson say that it was the Thornton sign that they took down and put up the Stebbins?
No, he said they moved the Thornton sign. I'll go back to it.
Remember, he's testifying in May, or June, or July. He's a early summer witness in July.
So this could have happened in the meantime.
Oh yeah, because the legal was all upset the fact they weren't going to deal as a witness. He gets permission from Redliff to go down there in the summer, and that's when he does it.
Compare the Betzner with the Willis. They're just not on a parallel. I mean, look how much different it is.
They don't look right, but
The Stebbins is deeply sloped. The Willis is almost...
yeah, the photos, the rotation of the backgrounds, I don't know if it's exactly right, but also Betzner is a little bit further up the street, isn't he, than Willis? Just a little bit further up the street. He's looking at it more square on, whereas...
I agree with all that, but still, it just looks like too much of a slope.
Yeah, it looks like it. When I measured it and did the trigonometry, it seemed to come out within errors. It seemed to be consistent, and also consistent with the Dallas Police Department photograph.
I'm throwing a question at you about this idea that everything fits Dealey Plaza and it's appropriate right now. Okay. You go back to that thing when you did that beautiful superposition of the Z-films into Dealey Plaza. You were saying so everything fits. Okay? Okay, yeah, that, even a wider angle lens, but that's fine. That's good enough.
Well, everything fits except what I'm going to speak about here, but okay, yeah.
Okay. There are 2 points I want to make, and one of them is very dear to my heart because I did work on the optical printer, but I'll go wherever the evidence leads. And the other one is, let me start with the psychological point. From 20 and 30 years ago, when we first examined this film, one of the odd things about Zapruder is he's centered right and left, but he's almost missing the action because it's down in the frame line. And it's always been my impression that that film is big frame. When you look at your thing, this is not a mathematical question. Don't you find it odd psychologically that this man is centering things right and left is almost losing the action at the bottom of the frame line.
Oh, absolutely.
That's number one, a real oddity to this guy with all this experience, and he's doing everything nice, right and left, and he can't get it correct up and down. He's not centering, number one. And the second thing is, I worked for a week, and it was either 1990 or 91, with the, I'll talk about this tomorrow morning, with the Zapruder film on an optical printer. And I'm telling you that between 315 and 320, everything goes off the scale. I have to reset the vertical. I have to reset the horizontal. It is so obvious on the optical printer that something's wrong. And my statement to Fetzer and to anybody else is to issue a public call. I told this to Willie Zabata during the ARB. You take the Zapruder camera, go up there on the pedestal, and film it full telephoto, and you can have me with this. I'll eat my hat if you get frames that are not beyond full zoom, because I had the experience repeatedly in the lab in New York. I had to change right and left. I had to change. Something's going on between about 360 and 30. It jumps. I have to bring it back into.
But are you sure you're not getting fooled by the pincushion distortion? Because as things sweep into the pin...
It's not 3%. We're talking about now.
No, the actual magnification of objects is not 3%. You've got to take the derivative. I was talking to David about it on the way back from lunch. You've got to actually take the derivative, and it's 3 times as large. So it's 10% magnification of small objects when you get to the corner, and when you get into the sprocket hole area, we're talking more than 10, 20%. Sorry?
No, right about at the center of the film.
But how are you comparing frames if you're not comparing one in the center with one when it's moving on?
Well, and second of all, the other thing is I'm using the Weitzman print. I'm using Weitzman's things made directly from the original. I'm using Weitzman's internegative. So I'm at a 35 millimeter machine, and I'm having to read this thing in reverse, and I made 600 feet of film, which is brand new and everything. They have blow-ups, all kinds of things on it. And there I am. And when I hit this point, I had a constant. Finally, they said to me, because I said, no, Center, do this. I said, look, operate the machine yourself. They got ticked off with me all these instructions. I ended up operating the Oxbury for a couple of 3 days. And I just think that, I know you've done the mathematics, and I know you're dealing with different sources for this, but I just tell you that if you take the stuff that this government paid $18 million for and put it on an Oxbury optical printer, I'd be astonished. I mean, I don't know the role your mathematics has played in making this look smoother than the experience I had, because I empirically had this experience and have been wild about it ever since 1991 when it happened. I mean,
now remember, MPI stabilized the film and did various things in creating the different image. I even talked to the guy who did it, and I said, did you realize he was actually taking out jiggles that were evidentially important and feigned no knowledge whatsoever?
But that was
evidentially significant.
But that was for the most tightly zoomed ones. They were trying to Grodenscope, I guess, for the tightly zoomed images. The ones that show the full sprocket holes, they didn't do that. In fact, one of the mistakes they made, apparently, according to one source, is that they didn't have the registration very well at all, and they had to get someone to come in and fix the rotation and get all the frames in the right position for each one they published, because they didn't have them all in the same position.
Jim just spoke a mouthful. He just said that these things are of evidentiary importance, and I agree with him.
Yeah, but
when I created, I mean, I brought one of these little things, but I mean, I have rolls of this stuff. When I was on that machine, I understand mathematically that you can clean this up, and I understand that NPI...
Oh, no, it's not cleaning up. And the frames you get on the MPI, I agree with what you get in the...
What I'm saying is that what he's got in New York City in 1967, he's got the 8 millimeter original. Life magazine hires him and says, we want to go up to 35. We're talking about the legitimate part of Life magazine now, the guys at 67 who want to make a buck and maybe sell rights or whatever. So they hire Mo Weitzman, and he says, well, you know, there's no, with all due respect to David Healy, he says, I don't have there's no optical printer that goes 8 to 35, I'll have to build a shuttle. So he designs a little shuttle, he goes to the machine shop and he designs it. So now we've got this piece of evidence, as Jim says, it's the original evidence. He goes 8 to 35. Then tomorrow I'll discuss the craziness that occurs with Grodin, who's like a kleptomaniac and all this stuff. But one copy escapes, and my friend in New York gets this copy. And I say, I want it. He won't let me have it. He's afraid of a lawsuit. So he hires a lab and puts it on the shelf at the lab with a letter of permission, so I can use this for a week. I create footage. And I'm having this experience with what is basically a copy of what this government calls the evidence. So I love the imagery, and I love the blow-ups, and I love the clarity, and all the stuff with the mathematics and the algorithms are correct for this and that and the other thing. But on the evidence as it exists, then at Life magazine, later at the the National Archives, and later at the now at the Sixth Floor Museum, This is the experience I had with a machine that has perfect registration, or at least as perfect as an Oxbury can be.
Well, I mean, we can compare what you've got to the frames that I was using, but we can compare what you've got and make sure the frames agree.
Registration is going to tell the story, I think.
But if each frame is identical to to within the blurriness of the MPI images, if it's the same frames, then I'm telling you that the mathematics, when you take into account the distortion, you don't have these problems. You're talking about the background blowing up and getting bigger and bigger because you've got to magnify it more each time?
I'm saying, I'll tell you what I think. I think when you take the Zapruder camera, and I spoke to Rose about this because there's a big argument I'll talk about tomorrow. Why didn't the ARRB do this? I have a whole story to tell about that, but they didn't do it. And they said, David, you don't even need Kodachrome film. Just use Ektachrome. Ektachrome, and then we're measuring the property of the lens. You put Ektachrome in there, and you run the whole thing through.
You've done that, haven't you, Rick? Oh, sorry, you're listening to something else. Yeah, I mean, they've taken films. Scott's taken films, Rick's taken films.
With Ektachrome through the Zapruder camera at full zoom.
Yeah.
David,
yeah.
Well, we should talk to him.
John, just one point before it gets lost and before you proceed. You said in creating this, they had to sort of stabilize frame by frame. Is that not right? And if that is correct, isn't that an indication that the film was put together frame by frame rather than shot continuously?
Sorry, MPI you're talking about?
Yeah.
No, MPI just did a terrible job. They just photographed.
Trying to kind of wobble frame from frame that they had to adjust.
No, it's just like.
Somebody in there to fix it.
Well, this is the story I'm told, that they had each... Okay, here's the frame and the sprocket holes, right? Got the sprocket holes on this side. And what they basically did when they scanned it, it was almost like giving it to your kid to just go and scan on your home scanner. Sometimes it was here, sometimes it was here, sometimes it was here, sometimes it was here. Not that, that's a little bit exaggerated, but basically they didn't make sure that the same...
It was in their copy, it wasn't in the original, it was in their copy. Is that what you think?
Well, they got the original film, and...
Was it an exact copy and that those features were in the original? Because that would suggest...
No, but the whole frame was moved. But to put it on the screen, you want to have it in the same position each frame. Even so, the version I showed you at the start of the film, I had to write a program to look for the edge of the sprocket holes because they still didn't... Maybe they didn't have to fix it up, but I tell you that when you look at the MPI copies, it looks like they have resized it and rotated it because the edges are so blurry. Even the digital edges are blurry, which means they've done so many things to it and it ends up being the wrong size anyway.
How can you tell the difference? I'm just curious between the resizing done by MPI and the resizing that we suspect was done on an optical printer.
No, I'm not talking about frame by frame resizing. I'm talking about all of the frames were in one format and then they changed it to something else and they changed it to something else and they rotated them, and the quality of the MPI images is inferior to what you've got, what Groden even puts out. It's inferior. The argument is they're very incompetent in that whole project. I mean, oh yeah, but the argument about MPI, the official argument, why they skip frames, why it's so blurry, why they didn't give us, why no one can give us the full scan of all of the frame, so we can have a look at some of these bystanders, so we can have a look at Greer's head turn at full zoom. In fact, I'll relate a very interesting story. I told you I started off trying to deblur these frames. And on the internet I found one expert in, I won't name him, but there was a person who appeared to be an expert in image processing who had written textbooks. And I sent him an email. I said, look, I was working on this deblurring in position space and it's a new method. What do you think? And he says, oh yeah, there's a couple of methods and that sounds like it might work. You know, how does it compare? And I'd mentioned I'm using the Zapruder films as a test case. Go to this website and have a look. And he said, I don't know why you're doing the Zapruder frames because all of them have been deblurred anyway. And I said, what do you mean? They haven't been deblurred. We're talking about deblurring, actually getting rid of the blur in each particular frame, so each one of them is sharp. And he said, oh yeah, they've been done. And I'd mentioned the MPI project. And he says, oh yeah, I had to come in at the last moment on that and bail them out because they stuffed it up with the registration. They didn't have the registration right. And in fact, he said, I've got a copy of the full digital scans of each frame locked in a vault. And I did a double take and said, you've got the full digital scans, can we get hold of them? Oh, no, commercial confidentiality, I can't do anything more about that. So I wrote to Gary Mack and said, look, there's this guy says he's got the, I named the guy to Gary and I said he says he's got the full digital scans and maybe researchers would be able to use them. This is before I dealt much with Gary Mack. And Gary Mack just sort of said, oh, yeah, it's interesting. Probably rang the guy and says,
zealous pursuer of truth that he was.
The next email, the guy said, look, I don't want to talk about this anymore, it's confidential. And I had contacted him out of the blue off the internet.
So you said Gary had basically replied to Gary told him to keep your mouth shut?
Oh no, but I think this guy just started getting worried about what I was implying, that he should make them available.
Oh.
He might have thought I was a, well, university worker or something on the correct side of the fence. In the know, maybe. And very bizarre. You want me to get back to land?
Go for it, yes.
The argument about the sign being moved, dug out and moved, put back in and whatever, and the groundskeeper might be talking about some later event, sounds fair enough. If the sign on the day of the assassination does not match the sign a few days later because they moved the sign, it's a possible argument. So you can't use that, as I haven't used that, as the primary evidence for things being wrong. The question then is, what about this this lamp pole over here? This is the Zapruder film, the Zapruder panorama. So you see all these versions of the limousine and the wall in the background, and it's all seamless because it all fits together. We'll discuss it. You think it doesn't fit together, but from my point of view, it all fits together. So here's this pole, and it's in fact even seen on. It's great to have these here. It's even seen on. The pole's even seen on this. It makes a very starring role in Life magazine. I guess I should take it out. And you see here, we're going to focus on those. The pole makes a bit of a starring role, and in fact, if you look at it on the Zapruder frames, it tends to actually bend the other way. Now, if you compare the lamp pole between the two panoramas, apart from the possible parallax shift, so if Zapruder moved his head, the pole can move sideways, but it can't change angle, it should line up. So if you do that, it is a little bit to the left of where it was 5 days later. I don't know what this black thing is around. I don't know if it's a black armband or something on the...
Well, there's another anomaly. If you look closely at the pole, the color version there, just
Yep.
for a second. Pop it up there.
Down.
Look at the globe with the bow. Okay, you see the lawn at the top where it meets the globe on the right there, right over here. Now go to the left of the bow, and you'll see that you have kind of a discontinuity from where the lawn line hits the bulb on the left and the lawn line emerges from the bulb on the right of the globe. And you can hypothesize about it, but I just want to point it out.
Shadows and bushes and...
Yeah.
I didn't look. Yeah.
No, you should.
Yeah, well, but when it gets to the edge of the lawn and the bushes, you've got an uncertainty. You haven't got something like a straight line which is demonstrably straight. You've got something.
I understand, but it's suspiciously curvy to the right of the
Yeah.
It reminds me of David Healy's talk about where the idea of that line.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those suspicious things.
Yeah.
I mean, this pole just didn't look right to me before I even did what I'm showing you here. But if you it's a bit harder to tell because it is to the left of where you'd expect it to be, which you can explain with parallax. But if you look at it for long enough, and in fact if you put them over the top of each other, you realise that this one is leaning a little bit to the right. The Zapruder film lamp pole leans a little bit to the right. Now this panorama has been set up so that vertical is vertical. Okay, so according to the Dallas Police Department, that lamp pole was pretty well exactly vertical, even without the washers that they put in for Jack's benefit. This other one leans a bit, so I think I've got some lines on there just to make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, I don't know if you can see the angle there. They could be in different positions, but they should be on exactly the same angle. So if it's leaning in 5 days' time, it should be leaning on the day of the assassination. If it's straight on in 5 days after the assassination, it should be straight on the day of the assassination. Now, as far as I know, no researchers or so-called researchers have argued that they broke the lamp pole out of the concrete and moved it within 5 days of the assassination. Jack wasn't even in Dealey Plaza within 5 days of the assassination. There's no reason to move it and change the angle by... that's impossible. So you might argue about the sign being moved and there's holes in the ground and there's stories of it being moved. Why is this the wrong angle? So again, you compare it to real life. This is sort of like secondary evidence that something is definitely wrong with the stem and sign and the lamp pole. It's about 1.5 degrees, which is not a huge amount, but it's not insignificant. I mean, these panoramas, as I said, are fairly accurate to, well, it wouldn't be fair to compare the angle for that, but the registration we have between the panorama and real life is quite accurate. Let me keep zipping along. In my opinion, at least, I think that what I've shown tells us that without doubt the extant film has been altered. The stem and sign's been plastered on there without much thought about the pincushion distortion. The lamp pole, both of them, if you like, foreground objects. Objects in front of the limo, in front of the background, in terms of David Healy's editing scenario. So you can understand why those two sets of objects are quite difficult, because the two things that stick up above the limo and above the background, you've got to get them all right. So that layer seems to be incorrect. Yeah, I said that. New lamp pole on the wrong angle. And I would say this is excessive haste for the images that were prepared for that first weekend publication in the Life issue that's dated November 29, but was available some days earlier. It's a mistake, it's a blunder, or mistakes. A couple of weeks later, now, you're saying this is December 2?
What?
The Memorial edition.
Well, it's November 29th.
Yeah. November 29th is the very first one, which has very poor quality black and white images. You can actually come and have a look at them, anyone afterwards. They are terrible quality. You can't see people's faces or anything. You can see the stem and sign beautifully, those panels down the side, but you can't see expressions on the President's face or Jackie's face, because it just goes from black to white. It's like it looks like a 6th generation copy or something. It's terrible. And in fact, someone emailed me the front page of a Chicago newspaper from the Monday after the assassination, which has one of the exact same images with the exact same poor quality, large on the front page. Yeah, the same as one of those. So it,
November 25, they're carrying the Zapruder film?
one frame, and it looked like.
The film was not made available to the